On behalf of Dr. Isabel, Penny will do a presentation.
So it's a difficult task to present someone else's paper without it being stilted, so I'm trying to paraphrase. Isabel, because she's actually a trainer of police, her paper is focused particularly on the view that she was using to teach police, and the interaction towards refugees. So she comments that some of the factors are the dynamics of the event, the sense of urgency, the need for a rapid response, the need for direction, and from the personnel who are there on the spot. The language is prompt, non-negotiable, immediate, there's no time lag, there's no, would you please in a few minutes go over there. It's now. It's direct and it's authoritative. And the function of the language is to balance the chaos, to create a sense of control, but it is loaded with an emotion, which Maha managed to avoid. She didn't say, go there fast, but we went. And the reality of the refugee experience is that they had non-directed flight away from danger, away from often abusive, uniformed authority. And as I'm talking, I'm thinking in my memory of talking to people, and the soldiers came to town, or the police came to town, they surrounded the house, they started shooting the people inside, we escaped out the back window. Their experience is police are perpetrators, not protectors. One of the important things is that Maha was wearing her uniform, because part of that is the concept of swift trust. You can't negotiate and ask, does she know what she's talking about? You just have to say, she's in a uniform, she's telling us what to do, let's go. And there is these role expectations, and we would recognise someone in a uniform who's speaking in an authoritative voice. We respect. We've been acculturated to that. However, sometimes swift trust is out of context, out of sync with people's understanding. They don't have that acculturation. And so the refugee experience needs to be included in that emergency management, because apart from your headgear, you just look very normal. And so we're not going to say, does this lady speak English? We're not going to say, do you have previous experience of trauma? We're just going to say, go. The background of trauma, the background may not be evident, and as was said earlier, the second trauma may be bigger than the first because of the pre-existing ground. And so aspects of the experience of trauma may not be immediately apparent, but should be anticipated when developing strategies or processes. And she's talking in this voice to the emergency response personnel. The person of refugee background may have negative experiences of authoritarian parents, fear of uniform, and super alert to a contagion of fear, because they've been there, not going to wait. And women that have been in violent relationships see the violence a lot earlier than other people. If it's violence in the street or anywhere, they'll pick it up a lot earlier. Survival mode sometimes means that extreme behaviour has become normalised, and specific directions may actually be understood, because the man with the gun that's trying to round them up says, go over there. They're not going to go. Issues for emergency personnel may be quite specific and include the fact that there's public opinion about them illegal queue jumpers that are trying to take over our country. And there may be also a lack of personal experience around diversity. I'm working with a lot of people from the Congo and from Uganda and Burundi, and they're quite dark-skinned. Their difference is obvious. Their competence is not. The way they fit in is not. And the unpredictable nature of emergencies is ties in also with the unpredictable response that you may get from someone of a refugee background. So these attitudes need to be reconciled. We've talked about training in domestic violence, we've talked about training, understanding of LGBTQIWXZ, but we also need to include people of non-English speaking background and not necessarily acculturated in that. We must never downplay their negative response to authority because they've been fleeing state-sanctioned violence. Will the form filling out, will the authorities in your country protect you? No. They have either stood by or engaged. Some refugees rely on this past experience to decide what to do rather than to respond to the standing orders in front of them. So there's confusion in inertia, or they may actually become aggressive. There needs to be multi-agency involvement can also add to the confusion because, okay, there's this and there's this and this, who do I listen to? We would look at the uniform and say, off you go. They don't know, is this the one or is that the one? The concept of swift trust is grounded in a recognition of roles as opposed to and that's in contraindication. So it has an impact on the dissemination of information. Isabel also talks about working on resilience from the ground up. I know we would question resilience at one level, but the previous experience, building trust, identifying allies to work with on the ground, critical friends, critical factors. And that's a way to work with all vulnerable communities, not just with refugees. And as Scott said, a shared vocabulary and climates of trust are essential for effective, safe management. Members of the community looked to play a role. Many of the members of the community will be looking to play a role as agents of change in creating safety themselves. Anecdotally, I heard when the floods were happening in Brisbane and those dreadful flashing floods caused significant death, some of the most effective people were people who didn't have much English but had been in major flooding in their own countries. And they were stepped forward when the majority of people were stunned. So trust is important. Organisations need to share the same vocabulary. And the other concept, because you're standing up, Maha, so that means I've got to stop. She's talking again about role clarity. Isabel really wanted to talk about what do you do when you've got a dark-skinned person who doesn't speak much English, they're actually gay or from the LGBT, and they've got a disability. Which box do you put them in? And we really do need to be aware when we're talking about being aware and alert to vulnerability, that we don't end up putting people in boxes that then sabotages how we are going to be able to help them. So thank you very much.